Hello, this is Andrea Nayotis, and this is my video reflection for orchestra as the 30 hours of creativity of my CAS hours. And I do plan on using orchestra as my other 20 hours of creativity for next year. Orchestra is something that I've been doing since I was 8 years old, the 4th grade. When I was 7, in 3rd grade, they had a little orchestra petting zoo. And I looked at the violin and said, too squeaky. I looked at the cello, but I couldn't get in. Everybody was trying to play the cello. But the bass was just standing there, kind of lonely. So I went up and started playing the bass, and I liked it. So I went home and I said to my mom, "Mom, I want to play the double bass next year in orchestra." She looked at me and she said, "How about the violin?" And I said, "No, Mom, I need to play the double bass." You know why? Because jazz bands always need double bassists, and I would never be out of work. And with that infallible argument, my mom allowed me to play the double bass and always helped me and financed me through the years. And through these years of orchestra, I have learned so many things. I've learned how much math is related to music. I've learned how physics is related to music. I've learned how to collaborate within a group, that in the orchestra, you don't always play as loudly as you possibly can, even when you do have a really cool part. And that even when you have a really bad part, meaning a part that isn't very well suited to you or to your playing abilities, that you need to work through it, that you need to spend extra time on it, not just put it off. And even when you have a really boring part, it's still important. Even if it's really quiet and just one note, you have to make sure that that one note sounds beautiful. So if somebody wanted to hear that one note, it would be there. And those are lessons that I've learned from orchestra in my, 7 years of orchestra now. So I counted this as 5 different learning outcomes for my CAS hours. In order, I count it for increased awareness of your strengths and areas for growth, undertaking new challenges, working collaboratively with others, showing perseverance and commitment, and developing new skills. I believe that undertaking new challenges and developing new skills as far as orchestra is very interrelated, because both of them involve getting a new piece of music, understanding what the piece wants, what the conductor wants, what the person who wrote the score wanted, and seeing that there may be some hard parts that you need to go through, you need to noodle, you need to learn the rhythms, you need to practice the notes, especially if there are accidentals, if there's some crazy shifting. And that is what I've done, especially with the orchestra piece Maharaja, which is the interpretation of a classical Indian piece, including all of the Indian grace notes that would have been implied if you had studied music in India, but to a Western orchestra, you need to write out these grace notes. And most of these grace notes sound natural if you're very used to hearing world music, which I am, having gone every summer to Cyprus, but they're not the grace notes that I would automatically do if I were just improvising, as I sometimes do in jazz band. Also, this part was written by someone who understood the cello a lot more than they understood the bass. The bass is tuned very differently than the cello. The cello has a better range, and it's much easier to shift on the cello. The parts that are written in for the bass are playable with practice, but I can say I undertook a new challenge to perfect the section of the piece that I needed to play for my seating test. I got up early one morning, not early enough to make my neighbors mad, but I got up early and I played through the piece. I practiced it. I made sure I had the right rhythm. I did the funny shifting, even though it was harder, just to make sure that all the notes were in tune, that all the notes were there. I guess I can say that I also developed a new skill. Being a double bassist, especially one who has great side reading skills, I very, very rarely actually practice bass, because I rarely find the need to practice. I always just say, it's okay, I can sight read it next time I go into class, because it's easy, it's a bass part. But this time I sat down and practiced, I guess you can say I practiced practicing skills. Something that our orchestra teacher has wanted to work on, because she believes that we can always improve and that we can definitely improve in our practicing skills, since it's not something that's explicitly taught or even well taught in elementary and middle schools. In elementary and middle school orchestras, they use very regimented paper things. You have to sign that you practice this many minutes a day. But how do you know that it's good practice? What if the person just sat there and plucked? And they didn't even pluck the right notes. They just sat there and noodled. Well, that's a great thing to do on your instrument when you have free time, but it's not a great thing if you have an actual piece to practice. So let's see. Increased awareness of your strengths and areas for growth. This is something that I actually talked to the orchestra teacher, Ms. Bond, about, because the seating tests are a perfect opportunity to see what exactly you have wrong and what you can fix. Or to say, I hear that this person in my section has a problem with this part right here. I wonder if I can help them with it. That is something that I should work on, my teaching skills, my leadering skills. And what Ms. Bond was suggesting was that she give immediate feedback, like a half sheet of paper at the end of class after all of these seating tests that said exactly what parts were good, exactly what parts needed more work, if there were rhythm problems or intonation problems, and how those could be fixed, even strategies for practicing them. And that is something that I really liked the idea of, so I went up to her at the end of class and asked her what I needed to improve on in the piece, and she said that the only thing she had written down was, good job, so I guess I really developed the new skill of practicing well, because I apparently did well on the playing test. But I think that in the future, especially when we do playing tests, and maybe I don't practice as much for it, I will know exactly where I need to grow, and I will know how to implement those. So an orchestra itself is completely working collaboratively with others. You aren't the only part unless you're playing solo, in which case it's not really an orchestra piece. And most of the time as a bass, you're not the most important part, or even the second most important part. You're not the melody, you're not the harmony, you're the bass note. You're, well, the drone of the bagpipe. And that is a fine thing to play because it might sound kind of empty without the drone. It would just be a little tune. It wouldn't be a full piece. It wouldn't have the resonance that it does. Working collaboratively with others in orchestra is something that you need to learn. It's one of the first things that they try to teach you in the elementary school orchestras, that it's great if you can play, but if you can't listen, you won't be as good as some of the other players who can. You need to make sure that you blend in with your section, that your section blends in with all the other sections, that the individual parts line up, not only with the section leader's part, but with the part of the orchestra. And that is something that, as a player in orchestra for many years, I have needed to practice. Sometimes you have to play loudly and confidently, even when you don't know the part as well. And sometimes you have to play really, really quietly, even though the part that you have is really cool and you want to play it loudly. But it all depends on the balance, and that is something that you can learn from experience. You can research within the piece, or you can ask the conductor about, because maybe the conductor has a personal preference on how he or she thinks the balance should be. Orchestra is also something that I believe shows perseverance and commitment. There have been those days, I'm sorry to admit, that I really just wanted to quit orchestra. Not for lack of loving music or lack of liking the instrument that I play, but for time, for wanting to do other classes. I want to do everything. I have so many classes that I wish I could be taking right now that I just don't have the space for. And orchestra has been the class that I can remove. It's been the elective, but at the same time I just can't remove it, and it takes a certain amount of perseverance to say, even though I have this obstacle, I need to get over it and see and reap the benefits of the commitment that I have put in all these years. Because while I don't plan on majoring in music, music is a passion of mine that I hope to keep lifelong, even if it's just as a hobby, along with my other professional studies. And I believe that's actually it for the IB CAS outcomes of orchestra. We don't consider ethical implications or do worldwide service, but this is a creative action that I do believe is very important, and this is the action that I plan on using for my 2-year-long activity.